Evangelical Scholar.
Again, evidence. We're looking at the evidence.
This week, in terms of you've got to set the case, because you're saying that the Hebrew Scriptures of Dr. Lapid are saying there's evidence that points to a specific person, and that is fulfilled in Jesus. All right, if that's so, then outline it for us, please. And let's stick to Isaiah 53 or in that area.
I had turned to this passage already. Isaiah 53, verse 8 says that by oppression and judgment the servant was taken away, actually snatched away. And who can speak of his seed, his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people, he was stricken. My people, identity. Who are the my people? I think it's Israel. So if the servant is Israel, how can the servant minister to the servant or to my people? No, the servant here is portrayed as an individual through this whole passage. It is speaking about what he has done, how he was despised, how he was rejected, and yet it was on behalf of my people. The mystery of the servant actually begins in the preceding chapter. In chapter 52, where you have verses 13, 14, and 15. He tells us before we begin this very, very difficult passage, my servant will have success. He's going to win. But then he makes a comparison in the next two verses, Isaiah 52, verses 14 and verse 15. Just as many as were startled when they saw him the first time. A man who was so beat up, so mocked, so badly treated that we turned away from him. He looked awful. Yet, just as many, says the next verse, there's a comparison, just as many as this, just so, kings, when they see him, will say, in effect, if I could give my own translation or paraphrase, well, shut my mouth. The kings will say, this is beyond understanding. For now he comes in all of his royalty. The very problem we've been discussing about the first coming and second coming. I see verse 14, first coming, he is smitten, he is bruised, he is beaten, yet he startles. Kings even are going to say, this is amazing. And then we go on to speak of his rejection, and then at the heart of this, his atonement. All we confess is Israel. And I think the Gentile community has got to identify there too as well. All of us, like sheep, there's the herd instinct, have gone astray. Each one of us, there's the individual responsibility, he's turned his own way. And the Lord hath laid on him, that is the suffering servant, the iniquity of us all. This sounds like Yom Kippur. It sounds like the very thing in Leviticus 16. Yet it is the servant of the Lord who is so identified with Israel. But it doesn't end there. This chapter ends in the last three verses with a fantastic statement of hope, for it changes gears suddenly. And in the last few verses, it turns around and it says that there's satisfaction here. He will see his seed and prolong his days, and the plan of God will prosper. So don't bite your fingernails. This thing will come out okay. And I think, if I understand this, though the word is not used, that's right. But he says he's going to give him a portion among the great ones. He'll divide the spoil of the strong. This same one who is smitten is coming back victorious. And I don't mind saying that I think this amounts to a case for the resurrection from the dead. I think that's the only way I can explain it. How someone who is cut off, who is dead for his people, and he was assigned a grave with the wicked, and yet with the rich. And I wonder, how can they pull that off? And yet, I do think that Yeshua, Jesus of Nazareth, there hung with thieves, and yet put into the grave with the rich. The text couldn't have been more precise there at that point. It is calling the details in the life of Jesus right to the money. And this 800 years before it took place.
Dr. Lapid?
Jeremiah says, I am like a sheep led to the slaughter. And everybody knows he wasn't the sheep nor led to the slaughter, but he speaks of himself in his suffering. Anyway, the most important thing is that the autobiographical interpretation of Isaiah 53 was prevalent, as we learn from Acts chapter 8, because the eunuch of Ethiopia on the way back, who had come to Jerusalem to worship, in other words, that guy wasn't an Ethiopian anymore, he must have been a convert or a semi-convert, reads on the way back home Isaiah 53. Well, that's no heathen who reads that kind of things on the way. And he meets Philippus the apostle, and the first question he asks him, listen to the question. Tell me, of whom does the prophet speak? Of himself or of somebody else? Where does he get that from? He must have gotten it in Jerusalem from the rabbis. The of himself was the first interpretation. The second one is Israel collectively. This tiny, little, weak people has been suffering for the rest of mankind, and the interpretation of the rabbis long before Jesus, and many after Auschwitz as well, say Israel is the expiatory ram for mankind. God visits Israel's sin with all the full impact upon that, we little people, in order to let mankind, guilty mankind, survive.
Hey, Dr. Kaiser?
I think we're close. I think we're very close. But there's one problem with making even the prophet or Israel. I can't tell you how horrified I am by the Auschwitz. I think it is one of the greatest blights on history. There's no doubt about it. But there's one problem in this text. Verse 9 and verse 10 are very important. In verse 9, he says here that this suffering servant has done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Now, I know that's not Isaiah's view of himself or his people or of me, I must say too as well. And that there, it seems to me, as a matter of fact, I had made a note in Isaiah 29:13, where he says, Israel has dishonored the living God with their mouths. So I know I have him already on record, and if indeed Isaiah is to be that suffering servant, or if Israel is to be that suffering servant, then I think they strike out on verse 9. And the other thing is that he gives his life as an Asham, verse 10, as a guilt offering, a trespass offering. And if you're going to give your life as a trespass offering, one thing for sure, if I know anything about the Old Testament, and I'm still learning an awful lot about the Tanakh, but it must be a ram without blemish. It must be perfect. And the life that's given here must be a perfect life. So I'll need Isaiah to be perfect. I'll need Israel to be perfect. I'll need the people in Auschwitz to be perfect if they're going to be that substitutionary lamb. That's the only requirement that I have.
All right, we're out of time. We're going to come back for a response right after our break, so please stick with us.
Welcome back. Well, that's very interesting to have two scholars on both sides of the view here. So I guess what we need to really look at is this him and he in this passage, where the rabbi says it represents Israel, and Dr. Kaiser says it represents Jesus himself. Would you like to comment on that, Mike?
You need to take a look at this passage, and you need to read the New Testament if you're a seeker of truth, and God will speak to you. Just ask him, and he will. He'll show you that he's the only way. There is no other religion that has the full truth. There are part truths. Sometimes a lie, people are deceived, and a deception is hid between two truths. And you find truth within any religion, but full truth, the way to God, as Jesus said, no man comes to the Father but by me. And he meant just him. And he said, all that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, and don't trust those that come after me. That's pretty clear. But going back to, what was that question?
Well, they were focused on Israel versus Jesus.
Right.
That this passage,
the we and the he and the... Yeah.
Right.
Constantly, it says there, it contrasts